doctor why you're getting an X-ray. Don't just let him be superior and you feel intimidated. Ask him, her, why. At the moment, the medical profession is the biggest irradiators of the public, especially CT scans. They're a very high dose. I had actually two CT scans recently. My daughter's a doctor. She persuaded me to do it. And I got a hell of a dose. And I said, Penny, this is mad. And she said, well, don't worry, Mum, you won't live long enough to get your cancer. That made me feel much better. Then there's gamma radiation, which is emitted from radioactive elements, from uranium mining, which is the fuel for nuclear power, all the way through to radioactive waste. It's the same as X-rays. It goes straight through you. You don't become radioactive. When the technician says, breathe in, hold it, and runs out of the room and goes click, in that instant, you are irradiated. Your cells can be damaged, but you do not become radioactive. It's the same as radiating food. It doesn't become radioactive. That's a whole different topic, which I won't get into. Then there's alpha radiation, which is composed of 2 protons and 2 neutrons emitted from an unstable atom. It doesn't travel very far. You can hold uranium, an alpha emitter, or plutonium in your hand, and the alpha particle doesn't penetrate the layers of dead cells to damage living cells in the dermis. And beta radiation is emitted from an unstable atom. It's just a tiny little electron. It travels further than alpha. Alpha is incredibly carcinogenic radiation. Carcinogenic means causing cancer. Now, how does radiation cause cancer? Well, you know your body's composed of trillions of cells. In every cell is a nucleus, and the nucleus has 46 chromosomes and the genes that are arranged on it. In every cell is a gene that controls the rate of cell division called the regulatory gene. And if you're exposed to radiation, be it an X-ray or an alpha particle, and I hit at that time, it's just by chance. If the cell isn't killed, the DNA molecule, the double helix molecule, becomes biochemically changed. You don't know it's happened, you get on with your life, you feel great about it, and then one day, instead of the cell dividing into 2 in a regulated way, it goes crazy and produces trillions and trillions of cells. Cancer is unregulated cell growth, and we can't usually stop it. And these cells are aggressive. They'll get into blood vessels or lymph vessels. One cell will go to the brain and grow into a secondary cancer. And so the body becomes full of cancer cells. It's like a parasite, and the patient then dies. So it takes a single mutation, a single alpha particle, to hit a single gene in a single cell to kill you. But you don't get cancer straight away. I hear there's a bit of swine flu around here, so I'm going to stay away from people who are coughing. But if I had swine flu and I coughed on you, within 2 days you'd have it. Measles, mumps, chicken pox, whooping cough, 3 weeks incubation time. But for cancer, it's 5 years for leukemia, which is cancer of the white blood. How do we know that? Because in Hiroshima, leukemia went up remarkably in 5 years. We've never seen anything like this before. 15 years later, solid cancers started appearing. And new cancers appearing now, many years since Hiroshima happened, which was 1945. So they're a guinea pig population, and we're still learning about the incubation period for many cancers. The incubation period is called the latent period of carcinogenesis. And let me give you an example. There was a meltdown at 3 Mile Island. The monitors went off scale within the first few minutes. So much radiation got out. Nobody knows how much radiation got out. However, it's 13 miles from Hershey's Chocolates. And they built 2 reactors in the middle of the richest dairying area of the country. And you've got a beautiful farmland here, and it's very rich, and I was really impressed by it. And I believe you grow organic food here too. The milk, so the cows graze there. And what happened was the radiation got out, lots and lots of it. It even reached up to Boston, where my children were. So particularly radioactive iodine 131, which only lasts for 6 weeks. It's a beta emitter and a gamma. And it goes to one organ in the body, which thyroid. So here's the graphs. And so the iodine landed on the ground, the roots sucked it up and concentrated it 10 to 100 times. The cows came along and ate the grass, and I can't draw a cow, but the active organ is the other. So the cows ate the grass, and the iodine concentrated more in the milk. And so Hershey's were so concerned, I've got the levels of radiation in the book from a whistleblower. They powdered the milk for 6 weeks till the radioactive iodine decayed away to nothing. But almost certainly strontium-90 got out, and I'll talk about that in a minute, cesium-137, and maybe some plutonium, and they last for hundreds of years. And we don't know the ground measurements around 3 Mile Island. They haven't released them, and I've been saying that to people since the accident, don't eat Hershey's chocolates, and they've never sued me. So don't eat Hershey's chocolates, because you might get a lump in your breast 20 years after you've eaten a Hershey's Milk Kiss. And it doesn't wear a sign saying, I was made by some strontium-90 that you drank in some cow's milk when you were lactating, feeding your baby 20 years ago. Do you understand what I'm saying? No cancer wears an identity about its origin. How do we know that radiation causes cancer? Well, there are lots and lots of medical studies. Women who used to paint the watch dials with radium-enriched paint used to lick the paintbrushes to make them pointy, and they swallowed a lot of radium, which goes to the bone, and most of those women died of leukemia and bone cancer. We know from the Hiroshima population, the Nagasaki population, the old radiologists who are very much exposed to radiation. I could go on and on. And I'll tell you about this in a minute. Now, there are other cells that are more important than the ordinary body cells, and they are the reproductive cells, the genes in the eggs and the sperm. And they're very precious. Here's the sperm, here's the egg, and the sperm and egg only have half the number of chromosomes and genes. When it's fertilized, you get the normal number, diploid number of genes. Every single cell in the gene in the egg and sperm is precious. We all carry several hundred genes for disease, and we don't know that until we mate with someone with a similar gene. Or you can have a baby with 6 fingers, which has occurred recently with a friend of mine, and that's a spontaneous mutation induced by one of the genes in the egg or sperm being mutated or changed. So if the genes are radiated by radioactive materials coming from nuclear power plants or X-rays, and you know that you're not allowed to have an X-ray in the second half of your menstrual cycle because you may be pregnant, and the fetus is thousands of times more sensitive to radiation than adults. So if you get a change in the gene, you could develop, or you could carry then genetic disease on to future generations, or it may be dominant, so you are born with Huntington's chorea. That's a dominant gene, and Woody Guthrie had Huntington's chorea, and I don't know if his son got it or not. Those dwarfs that you see, achondroplastic dwarfs, that's a dominant mutation. And I saw a family once at the Children's Hospital. Mother had dwarfism, father didn't. There were 6 kids following, and 5 had dwarfism. Now, because this is kind of my area of specialty, there are 23,000 genetic diseases now described. But we won't see them for a long time. If a mutation is a recessive gene, it takes 20 generations for the 2 genes to get together to make a child with diabetes, cystic fibrosis, phenylketonuria. I could go on and on. We know that by watching fruit fly and irradiating them, and they